Hey, everybody, welcome back to season 3 of LA Sessions. I am Bryan Do, LMFT, and I'm happy to be back. We're going to have a slightly new look for our podcast, but still sticking to important topics and just having cool guests. And today we have Andrea Cruz, a licensed marriage and family therapist. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you, taking time out of your day to be here with us. And just for people who don't know, can you just give us a brief introduction of who you are, how long you've been doing this, what your areas of expertise are?
Absolutely. Yeah, so my name is Andrea Cruz. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I feel like the healing journey began very early on for me, as well as the therapeutic journey. I was fortunate enough to start learning from one of the best Adlerian therapists at a very young age. As I went through my own therapeutic interventions and childhood trauma, which led me to an amazing therapist that I held on to for very many years. And I reflect on some of the things and the work and the interventions that she had done. And we maintained a good, healthy relationship. Um, yeah, so I mean, if it wasn't for Roseanne Landis, I'm just going to give credit where credit is due. I don't think I would be a therapist here today, going all the way back to those root days and those root issues, right? And I also became a therapist in the humanistic existential division 32 with the APA. Um, for several reasons. I think that it definitely aligns with my theoretical perspective and orientation. Of course, I borrow all the time, and I would probably say I lean more towards psychodynamic when it comes to working on the earlier stuff and some of the schema. But the existentialism really spoke to me because the question underlying throughout all of that, first of all, it's very philosophical. And the question is why? You know, why do we do the things that we do? What makes up human behavior? Why do people act in this way? What are the reasons in which we're responding? What is a life? And what's our purpose in it? And borrowing from various existentialists like Viktor Frankl and logos theory and others along the way. I feel like we as clinicians have borrowed from the greats in many times, learning from people like Carl Rogers, um, Carl Jung is still one of my favorites. So I think in my own healing journey, I sought to know myself better and stop to correct some of those patterns that I
Yeah.
wanted to understand more of why the hell am I doing this shit? And then when I got to that point, um, I thought, well, maybe it's time for me to start giving back to the world around me and to the community around me. And that's why I became a therapist.
Yeah, you got your start in community mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, with you at Penny Lane is my very first therapist role. So, I'm so glad that you're definitely one of those original friends. I got to know you prior towards licensure. So, it's kind of cool to have seen your evolution as well.
I don't know what you're talking about. I came out of the womb like fully formed and with all the knowledge that I have. That's the story I tell. That's my origin story. So yeah,
Your origin story. Okay. Okay, glass. I won't break it.
yeah. So because got you started in community mental health, and I know you've
Mhm.
obviously moved on to do bigger, better things and all that. Can you tell us about like just some of the projects you're working on now, and just what your vision is for your mental health future?
Sure, but let me give credit where credit's due. Like, if it wasn't for that community mental health, like, I honestly feel, although those were one of the hardest times in my career path, it also like really set me up for understanding the trenches of the people that we're serving. We were serving the youth, and honestly, that's where my heart is at, regardless of all the amazing things. And I truly feel they're amazing things that I'm doing in my life, starting a group practice, um, and doing community based work. But like giving back to the children is like always, always my heart. And that's really what I aspire to do is open up like homes for foster youth. Like I actually like that's why I think I give you so much credit where credit's due because like those Tay years, transitional age youth, like those teens. I'm still working with teens in private practice, like grow and like I'm never gonna turn off those clients because like to me that's just where it's at. Molding young minds. And I feel like if you can work with the youth you can work with anybody because there's a little bit of inner child within all of us that is still needing to grow, that is still needing to heal, that is still doing the work. So, that community mental health, that those foster youth, like that's my end goal. Like my end career is going to be like, how did I give back to those kids? But yeah,
Wow.
Valari counseling is where I'm at. And that's what I'm starting. I'm the founder and CEO of ValariCounseling.com.
And
And
we'll have the link in the description for people who are
yeah,
watching.
thank you. And there's some events coming up. I'm doing free webinars. The current one that I'm doing right now is how to not self abandon. I think that's the one right out of the gate. And we could talk a little bit more about what self abandonment looks like, internal conflict, what that angst is. And the other one that I'm doing is failure to launch, failure to fly, and how to not procrastinate. So, like those are things, oftentimes we get stuck in our own heads, and we need to find ways to to move into a state of action, of doing, of being. And sometimes we just need to be shown the way a little bit and have a little hand holding, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a goal without a plan is just a wish. But the one thing you need, there's
Hmm.
also action. There's just
Hmm.
launch and go, like you said. And I think some people, I would say maybe this is even a topic for another episode, but people are kind of scared right now. I mean, scared in a lot of ways, but one of those
Yeah,
reasons is kind of scared to try something new. But at the same time, they don't want to take that leap, but they want the rewards that come from it. And so, kind of finding that why, like you mentioned earlier, I think is really important for some people because I don't think they think about that. And
right,
you're right about like your inner child is always going to be there. I think some people do kind of maybe suppress is a strong word, but they kind of move away from it. They forget about
right,
the joy
right.
of doing things, where there
Yeah.
isn't a purpose. Like the best example I would give my clients is think of how happy you were when you were a kid, you played hide and seek. There's actually absolutely no sensible purpose just to except fun. It's just to have fun. But somehow we lost out on that when we got older, and this idea of just being able to chill and relax on your day off maybe and just doing something maybe not stupid, but like has
Mhm.
no meaning other than what it means to you. Who cares what other people
Right,
say, right? And people
right.
aren't necessarily in tune with that because I think there's a lot of stress in the world right now, and it's affecting
Yeah.
people. And we'll get into one of those topics in a little bit,
Yes.
but yeah. But
Hmm.
something I want. Speaking of which, I know we're talking about certain things that are affecting people's mental health right now, but in your
Right.
opinion, Andrea, like what do you think? What's your opinion on the current state of like just mental health and therapy?
That's a great question. I think with what we've had, I think we're doing the best that we can. Do I think there's ways that it could be innovated? Of course I do. I mean, currently there's a structure that we have, which is insurance. Most of the times is insurance-based pay and one-on-one therapizing, counseling, coaching, for the licensed professional, you're sitting down for that hour and whatnot. But what what I have seen do the most amount of growth work, like the most amount of innovation, has been in facilitation in residential treatment centers and in group settings like IOPs. It really brings about a certain amount of 360, 180 turns, and it gives people an opportunity to not only learn from the professional, but also learn from each other. And I find that it extremely beneficial to the growth work that could occur with an individual because they're processing, they're reflecting. There's always someone somewhere along the way that has a story to tell that could be relatable. It could be the cook who is, on the floor and is like holding a nurturing presence in space. It could be that behavioral tech who is, in the trenches with them on a daily basis when they're struggling and suffering from either a family dynamic that's gone wrong or severe untreated trauma diagnosis or even substance abuse and addiction. So, I mean, it's been very rewarding for me in my career to have been a clinical director for the last 3 years now, for maybe 4 years, 2022. I don't know. 2022 is when I started. Oh, it's 2026. Yeah. Yeah. 4 years, clinical director in substance abuse treatment centers and being able to hold that space, do individual work with clinicians, lead teams. I mean, if I could provide that, in fact, that's kind of what I'm getting ready to do is on my group practice is providing groups therapy, not only online, but in person as well, where I'm going to be taking people to various places to provide group therapy work in a hybrid fashion. So that's the goal.
Yeah, because a lot of what I hear that you're saying is like this innovation in mental health because it used to be what, like one-on-one therapy in a therapy room,
Mhm.
right? That's
Right.
kind of traditionally what everybody thinks, and it's still like that. But I've
Mhm.
noticed, especially during the pandemic, for example, um, mental health providers have had to innovate to create different ways
Yeah,
of role services in a way that clients can understand, whether
right.
that's online groups, online telehealth
Mhm,
platforms. I mean,
mhm.
I remember on social media, I even saw one, it was more meant to engage, like, teens, but it's, like, through video games, like, like online games where you engage them as they're playing, and at first, I
Mhm.
won't lie, I thought it was kinda silly because like, I don't play video games anymore,
Yeah.
but I kinda thought, well, it wasn't first of all, it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for, like, maybe the 16-year-old version of me, and I thought, "You know what? In that sense, depending on the game where maybe it's not intensive, so it's not like you're under stress. It's actually a great
Mhm.
time to talk to someone because people do that in
Yeah,
online gaming all the time. Now, granted, what they're saying online is usually not very good, but in this situation, it can be very, very good. You're not your therapist ain't gonna be talking crap with you when you play Madden. They're gonna be
exactly.
engaging you when you're engaged. And so I thought, you know what? Kudos to whoever thought that up because they're really trying to meet the client where they're at, which is kind of what we try to do in therapy. You try to
Yeah,
engage how you can. So,
that's
yeah, I mean, a
cool.
lot of what you're talking about, that's what it reminds me of. I mean,
Yeah,
and for you, if you're going to be starting a whole practice, that is a very good skill to have. But I find that not all therapists have that. It takes being a therapist, but also having like an empire building, an entrepreneurial spirit to kind of move forward with that. And that's something I've always said that you had, even though what I didn't quite understand it myself. So yeah, I
thank
figured you
you.
would you do that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'll take that as a compliment. Definitely have always had a streak of industry, a streak of entrepreneurship in me, prior to me becoming a therapist, before the crash of 2008. I was a realtor for quite a few years, and so I got to work with people in a completely different capacity, but what I ended up finding was the, clients that stayed with me the longest because you're still establishing a relationship no matter what, even though it was a professional setting in a different capacity, when you're selling a home or you're providing, loan modification, loss mitigation, or even, as a loan officer. So I did all of that before the crash in 2008. And what I saw was I was holding a lot of space, and I was providing, like, really good therapeutic services towards my clients, and it just made sense when I went back to college to get my master's that it just I took a counseling capstone class. I think I had, dropped out of college at CSULB and came back around in 2010, 2000 graduated in 2012 at Cal State Long Beach, and I took a capstone class, and it was such a great class because it reminded me of my original passion, which was, um, that I'm an ENFJ, that I'd make a really great therapist, that it just seems that my personality, naturally is in alignment with, doing this type of work, so I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Now,
Mhm,
you mentioned one of the areas of expertise you had and areas of experience you've had was with addiction. And I know when
mhm,
people think addiction, immediately they think substance use or alcoholism, right? Those are the two.
mhm,
But I know
mhm.
today's topic is on another type of addiction that slides under the radar, but when it hits, it could be a relationship destroyer. And that, of course, is pornography. Okay. Now, what do you think are some of the effects of pornography? They can be good or bad. What do you think?
Well, I certainly think that, porn addiction is not healthy, um, for the consumer and not healthy for the watcher for several reasons. There's a neurobiology causation that occurs. You know, we're used to a certain amount of dopamine triggers during the day. And of course, when you're interacting sexually with a loved one, a partner, or in a committed relationship, or anybody for that matter, there's a greater amount of dopamine, oxytocin that is occurring during that time. Well, it so happens to be that watching pornography itself can create a even higher level of dopamine than the actual sexual encounter that you might be having. And because one might one might be watching pornography, especially when you're an addict, more than once a day. You could be watching it 2 or 3 times a day, and, of course, that type of arousal, and ejaculation can be desensitizing to a human being, and so what ends up occurring is that they need that type of arousal when engaging in intercourse, and I have found in men and women, although in men it is more prevalent and more common that when they are faced with um, regular sexual encounters, that they have less of an arousal. And in fact, some of them even experience erectile dysfunction because they're used to the high octane, high dopamine effects that occur when experiencing the rush of watching, which is clearly staged, clearly performative type of sex and highly unnatural. You know, as you could see, it's the angles are odd. I doubt it even creates as much pleasure for the people who are acting and screaming and vocalizing over the course of the watch. Um, so just in regards to the physiobiological, it already decreases and I'm not even talking about relationally, it already decreases the chances of great healthy sex in a real relationship.
Yeah,
That's
and let's touch on that because you mentioned something
Mhm,
really interesting, and I know the stats say something like 37% of men in relationships report to watching porn like once a week at least, while
mhm,
the number of women is closer to like 5%. Okay, so
mhm.
do you think can you think of any reason why it affects men more?
Well, and that I think that's a great question because what I find is it's they have more exposure. Males tend to have exposure to pornography at a younger age. At least for those who I've noticed that have experienced porn addiction, they're gaining exposure as early as 5, 6, 7, very young, right? And so, as we know who have worked with kids, if we had learned that a child was watching pornography, that would be considered not only neglectful, but possibly sexually abusive to have that content laying around. Because what we know what it does to the young mind. And if you don't, let me explain it to you. For the young mind who is consuming that pornography, it creates a neural pathway of arousal and visualization of arousal has to be simultaneous, right? So oftentimes, what you'll find when really well certified sex therapists are working with sexual pornography or a form of addiction, they'll and I am not quite certified in this, but they'll work in a form of therapy that's called sensate focus, which is really for the client to be doing on their own, but it's homework, right? And this homework is to recondition the mind to no longer be aroused by the visualization of watching and to now be only aroused by the sensations that occur when you are engaging in a sexual act. So that's really hard because men are very visual, right? Men like to see a beautiful, well, if we're just going with the cis normatives, okay, I just have to put
Right.
that disclaimer out, right? If we're
Sure.
going on cis normative, a masculine male, gender heterosexual male, which, you know, I have to put that disclaimer out. So if we're going based off of those gender roles, you know, men tend to be very visual, right? And so when they see something beautiful, the arousal is there. Not to say women are not to say women aren't turned on by other things, but the desire for connection is more prevalent for the woman. You know, they want to feel some type of emotional connection or maybe mental stimulation, but men could get aroused by looking at somebody that is pleasing to them. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah. No, I agree with that. I mean,
Mhm,
I think again, I'm going off of a different starting off point when it comes to that in terms of my therapeutic alignment. But like I look at it from an evolutionary standpoint. Um,
mhm,
there we men and women like we're driven towards different things, and one of those things, like for desire in men, is definitely what's pleasing to the eye. That's
right,
100%. Women, you're
right.
right. I think they crave more connection.
Mhm,
I would throw in there also this feeling of being secure. I would put that as well. I think because
mhm,
when I work with male clients, I definitely tell them, uh, guys, you might have this image of like you got to be like super super handsome and all this, and that doesn't
mhm,
hurt, but you have to work on other things like being a good communicator, provider, problem solver. You
mhm,
still got to do those kinds of things because once the whole dopamine hit is gone, you have to still make your partner feel safe. That's where later, because,
absolutely.
early on said that's a dopamine hit. Later in a relationship, it becomes about oxytocin, feeling safe, feeling
Yes.
there is that emotional connection. And so if you're a guy, you've got to definitely be able to still to provide that moving forward and basically
Mhm.
growing up. Because when you first get together, you're in that little teens in love kind of a phase, and it's
Little
cute.
bubble.
But then you
Little
have
honeymoon.
to yeah, you gotta
Mhm,
think about the future a little bit more. Now that being
mhm,
said,
mhm.
um, men are so much simpler. Um, it's been said, I'm not gonna say I disagree or agree with it, but the reality is in in relationships, if you take sex out of a relationship, the guy is not gonna be far behind. With women, when security and connection disappears is usually when they're out the door. Because it's almost always the men complaining about not having sex. I mean, I'm not saying women don't, but yeah, I mean, it's simpler. But I also see, just to make a connection to what you said about how if some men are getting more aroused, getting more fulfilled by watching pornography, which is
Mhm,
really an artificial sex, It's like,
Mhm.
synthetic sex because it's not them doing it. They're watching two people do it
Exactly.
in a controlled environment, in a artificial
Mhm.
environment because it's a movie. It's what it is.
That's right.
But if it gets to that point and you're not able to make that human connection anymore, then that's where the addiction, I think, actually is overpowering the relationships in that regard, and it could be very, very difficult. And
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
it does take work, right?
Well, and the reality of it is too, is there, and this is has been shown to be not only statistically proven, but proven over the longevity of watching, observing people who get addicted to pornography, is that their craving for, um, let's just say, release or ejaculation or arousal becomes greater and greater and greater over time, meaning they need to see a little bit more and they need to get a little racier and then a little kinkier. And then you'll see that there's a really horrendous statistic of about 12 or 13% of these videos are based off of non-consenting, heinous acts, which are abusive towards these women. And the other statistic that I find very disturbing is that about 56% of women who are involved in pornography have been sex trafficked. So about one out of two videos that you watch um, are actually women who, for whatever reason or another, have been, um, let's just say, groomed to
Yeah.
be in these situations, and it's highly coercive because that they're technically being pimped out. They thought for whatever reason their life has had no other choice but to stoop to that level of sex work because it's what it really is. It's sex work, and I'm not meaning to shame the women for those who have made the choice, who have chosen to objectify themselves to that degree. But oftentimes, and I'm talking about women who are doing the sex work, and I should include the men that are doing the sex work, but um, you know, the age in which trafficking occurs between these young women start as early as 12 and 14 years old. So, um, and I could say this just from my own experience and working with the men who have been addicted to pornography. When they think of it in that regard, they tend to morally and start to have an internal conflict for a few reasons, not just because of that statistic, but because of the amount of shame that occurs when they have difficulty in their own romantic relationships because of the increased need and desire to have that certain amount of arousal while they have to think of pornography in order to enjoy the acts of sex.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up the book on sensate focus, which I remember you and I consulted years ago, and you actually suggested that as a pretty good book. I actually bought that and I've used it. I've referenced it in and actually some clients they fall into the category you're talking about actually, and
Mhm,
so
mhm,
they're trying to make it work with their
mhm,
significant other, but they're just not sure how because by then they start to get really anxious about performance. Because you're
mhm.
going from watching something to now performing sex with your wife, and it's
Right.
hard. And so I just told them, well, let's take the performance aspect out of it. And so, gave them some
Mhm,
homework, if you will, in terms of
mhm,
just how to go about focusing on sensations and not focusing so much on ejaculation, the end game,
mhm,
and so
mhm,
it's like, so I'm actually telling them to slow down, not speed up. And so
mhm.
for people who
Exactly.
aren't sure, there's lots of videos on YouTube that can explain it better than I can, but
Right.
I think it's worth a look, especially if you're watching this and you feel it may apply to you or you might be in danger of it one day. Take a look. Um,
Mhm,
we're talking about addiction, and I think there's another part of the addiction that I want to flip it around, and we're talking about the
mhm,
men to watch. But
Mhm,
you talk about sex work, and this is where I kind of I feel some empathy for the women who are on the other side of it because,
mhm,
especially like you said, if you're young, and let's say you're someone who, like some of us are lucky in life when we find out what we're good at a young age.
mhm,
I think most
mhm,
people would agree. Athletes, for example, that make it to the
mhm.
highest level, they didn't start when they were teenagers. They started really young, and
Right.
somebody in their life nurtured that. They just happened, the lucky ones, the really skilled ones happen to then go to college for free on that, and then they
Mhm,
get drafted, and then they get a career, they make millions, and that's like the best case scenario, right?
mhm,
Well, I look at it with some of these women who go into sex work, and I make that athlete comparison because for people who may be very judgmental about it, I would say it's like this. Imagine if you're like a young lady, you're like 19, 20 years old, did not come from the best upbringing, but you only get attention because of your looks. And then somebody tells you you can make a lot of money by having sex on film. Okay. And you already
mhm,
think nobody likes you or whatever. That is a really enticing offer. And it's hard to walk away from until you get old. That's why you got former porn performers really, really like, complaining and talking about how much abuse there was, trafficking, like you said, after they've already left the industry. And unfortunately, because of that, nobody listens to them. But
mhm,
it doesn't make it any less real. It's hard for a young person to walk away from hundreds of thousands of dollars. And
mhm,
without the proper supports in your life, you're probably not going to because you got to support yourself. And
mhm,
so I have to say that for people, because in our line of work, it's hard to work this many years without having a client, several clients that have been trafficked. And when you hear their story, it humanizes it, right? I mean, you see the why. You
right.
mentioned the why about things. And I think that's something that I think people have to really, really think about before they jump to snap judgments and they say, oh, well, she's this, she's that. Well, she was put in this situation for a reason. Now, yeah, sometimes they keep going with it because they feel they have no choice. But like I said, it's hard for a person like in their early 20s, mid 20s to walk away from more money than they're ever going to get working a 9 to 5 job. And that's part of the addiction cycle, I think, because it's supply and demand. They're going to keep doing it. Men are going to keep buying their wares. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, that's going to say if they're the women who actually choose, right? I mean, we're not talking about the women who don't get to choose, right?
Oh, yeah, that's
Or
absolutely like
e e
atrocious. Yeah.
exactly, and so we just never know who is choosing to live that lifestyle and who is not choosing to live that lifestyle when we're watching this pornography, you know? So that being said, is it enticing for young women? I'll tell you this. I haven't met a single sex worker who I've worked with who hasn't experienced trauma by working that type of job. And every single sex worker that I know, male and female, because I've met them both, um, are just have tons of trauma in regards to after leaving that industry, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. Um, and obviously having to deal with whatever repercussions came from that, if their values changed afterwards, if they're returning to some value system of some kind, if they decided, oh, I, no longer want to do harm to my body, because I'm sure after a certain amount of partners and the body count being fairly high, the susceptibility that you're going to be having an STD, that you're going to be experiencing somebody violent on the other side or someone non caring. At the end of the day, what we're not talking about is when two individuals have sex, it's a sacred experience. Like it is a beautiful thing. It's like it's not, in my opinion, to be considered a transaction. Like this is our innermost workings of our bodies. Us women, we're portals. Men are, they have the ability to reproduce by planting seed. I mean, just to put it as lovely as I possibly can, the reproduction of our species, of our race, is a sacred thing. And we should consider it as such. that whole thought process that, you can friends with benefits, but like what like situationships. There's another term that I'm thinking of that's not coming to mind, but not Netflix and chill, like, but all of these like casual ideas of having sex, like no strings attached, right? That's it, no strings attached. Um,
I think the
it
term you're looking for is booty call.
Oh, yeah, okay, booty call. I mean, if you put it like that, you know? But at the end of the day, okay, at the end of the day, who ends up catching feelings? Somebody does. And more than often, it's the women, but sometimes it's the men too. And
Hey,
if a
listen,
woman gets
yes, listen, young lady. I've seen Pretty Woman. Okay, uh,
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying is, like, someone's gonna catch feelings at some point, you know what I mean? Because you're exchanging your energy, like, and if you're not catching feelings, all I gotta say is, you're fooling yourself. You're playing yourself because I mean, just think about it, how many women have objectified themselves enough, or men, have objectified themselves enough, or the person that they're sleeping with to the point where all of a sudden, like, it's just another number, it's just another person, it's just a body count, like, like, oh, I can have this and that too. And it really kind of just dehumanizes the whole, um, dating world. So I wonder, like, I wonder, talk about modern dating, like, I wonder, to what extent, like, people are like, no, I'm going to find the right person and be with that person, or I'm just going to have like random sex with so many people.
yeah, yeah. So when it comes to relationships, I mean, I think both men and women, there's this sort of unrealistic expectation that they both feel. If a guy is addicted to watching adult movies, going on Pornhub, going to OnlyFans, well, then he's going to project very unrealistic qualities onto his girlfriend, his wife.
Mhm,
And I think r- if you flip it around, I think another kind of addiction we're kind of seeing, and I think it has to also be addressed, is like social media consumption too, and because there's a lot of
mm,
fakeness that goes
mhm,
on in there. Nobody
mhm,
really like people who tout success. It's kind of rare they go on there and they talk about the difficulties they have. It's always like, oh, look at all the cool stuff I have, right? And
mm,
then I think that unfortunately makes some women their again,
mhm,
this is where their desire, their need to be provided for comes in. I think that's what a man should be. A guy
mhm,
should have a Porsche. He should have a Bugatti. He should have this. He should have that. He should be taking me to Dubai. When there are a lot of good men out there that, blue collar job, maybe they make like $60,000. That's nothing to scoff at, but they're not going to be millionaires, and they probably don't want to be either. They're probably
mhm,
okay with just working a job that it's a trade that they're good at. They just want to,
mhm,
they want a good woman too.
mhm,
And I think this is where modern dating is really, really hard, because I know we started the topic about pornography and it's, unrealistic expectations, but there's so many, right? Unrealistic expectations, and they are born
mhm,
out of different types of addiction, I think.
mhm, mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I concur.
Hey,
That's all I got to say to
let me tell you
that
something. Let me tell you something. Little pro tip for women out there. That's all
one.
a man ever really wants to hear. That you agree with them.
I concur. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Contrary to popular belief, it's not actually nagging. We don't actually like that. I don't know how that
Noted.
horrible, salacious rumor got started, but we don't like nagging. We love to be told that you're in agreement. That's awesome. That's enough for us to retire for the day, you know? It We're just like, "Good." We're just like, "My work here is done." And you're like, "It's 2 PM," you know? Us
That's
men, we hear
hilarious.
that from our significant other. That's good. We wash our hands, we go to bed, we just go in our sarcophagus, and we retire for the night, you know? That's it. That's our dopamine's firing on all cylinders on that one. See,
Right.
we're a simple species, you know?
Yeah.
Look
Yeah.
good, our significant other looks good, gives us words of affirmation, and
Mhm,
at that point, just
mhm.
give us a Coke.
I do wanna I spin one thing off of that. It did trigger sort of a thought of, there's another aspect of pornography that is very interesting. My husband I was telling my husband earlier today that I was gonna be on your show, and he obviously knows, but, we're friends and that, the subject that we're talking about is pornography. And he mentioned something that was really interesting to me, and I thought that was, um, pretty cool, but interesting enough that I thought I should probably bring it up because I thought it was hilarious. Um, that there was a woman who was on the spectrum, and all she had to go off, before dating and having sex with somebody was the pornography that she watched. And so she thought that the primary reason for having sex was to not enjoy it, but was to be performative and please the guy until he ejaculated. So I thought that was interesting because it's unrealistic, you know? Like if we take that stance as women that our duty in the most sacred act is so that the man has all the pleasure, then is that really even like is that true enjoyment? Like, it does bring me back talking about, like and I kinda see it, like, as healthier forms of sexual relations. There's this book that was made many, 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 many years ago, and this is probably crossing over the boundaries of, the faith that I'm having right now, that I'm practicing right now, but it roots in Hinduism, and it's a book that many people know to this day to be one of the best sex books ever written, and it's called Kama Sutra. And, and they have obviously illustrations of all these amazing positions, but the wonderful thing about this book is a husband wrote it for his wife so that he could please her to have multiple and multiple, multiple orgasms. And it was enjoyable for both of them, you know? So it kind of takes away the mysticism of exploring a person for the first time when you have been infiltrated with this is how sex should be done, and it's only in regards to this performance, you know? Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that.
Speaking of unrealistic expectations, women out there, don't expect all of your men to do all the positions in the Kama Sutra. Listen, as we get older, we cramp up, okay? We get a spasm. Listen, it happens, okay? We're not all hot yoga practitioners, okay? We can't all be like Jean-Claude Van Damme and do the splits. So just cool your jets, all right? Now, I thought when you were saying there was that young lady who got all of her sex knowledge from watching porn, I thought you were going in a different direction with it. I
I
thought,
know.
when the plumber fixes her pipes and she, has to end in a different kind of transaction. I thought that's where you were going. I'm glad it wasn't though.
That's not what I was yeah.
But yes. But no, I just definitely wanted to say thank you, Andrea, for coming
Yeah,
on the podcast.
thank
I
you.
hope you come on again, especially after,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I know you got other projects down the pipeline, and Lord
Mhm.
knows we've got lots of different mental health topics to throw
Definitely.
around on
Yeah.
the podcast. So
I would love to be on your show again, and I look forward to it, and thanks for the bit of controversy that we are sparking today.
I think, I think this is pretty light, if I must say so. In the mental health sphere, I think they're so used to just being safe and
Mm.
I know you and I were having this conversation offline about like
Right.
sometimes, safety is good, but it holds us back. Sometimes we got to
Mhm.
make a leap. Like
Right. Right.
as clinicians, I think it's important. One thing that I will die on this hill where it should be the standard for clinicians, especially in private practice, when you
Mhm.
promote yourself, be honest about what you're actually good at. Be honest about
Mhm.
what kind of clients you're best suited to work with so that you're not doing them a
Yeah.
disservice. Don't put on your profiles that like you have all these different modalities that you specialize in when in fact some of them are actually like contrary to one another. Your
Mm,
consumer doesn't know that, but we know that. And
we know
I
that.
am
Yeah.
gonna judge you if you do that. You know, people are gonna do
Yeah.
that to be
Okay.
generalists,
Mhm,
right? Because they think,
mhm,
well, if I say I'm good at everything, I'll get more insurance referrals, I'll get more private referrals. Yeah, but
mhm.
you gotta be good at your job,
But
you know?
you have your client, you do have your niche. You do have the people that you're here to serve, right? That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
think it's important for people to be honest and transparent about that because,
Right.
I don't know if this has been your experience. I'll just share, like, I've had some
Sure.
clients where they'll tell me I'm like their 2nd or 3rd clinician because the first ones did work out. They thought they were
Yeah.
getting
Yeah. I've had that.
something else, and it sucks to
Mhm.
hear, it sucks to
Yeah.
hear,
Mhm.
because again, our clients don't know about modalities, but what they do know is when they look at your specialty, if they see that you're like, wow, she does trauma informed care and she does this, but
Mhm.
she, with along with like 20 other things, but then you
Mhm.
go for trauma, to really address some trauma in your life, and you find out they're not very good at it. I'm
Mhm.
open about the fact that this should not surprise you, but I am not a great grief therapist, That's not what I do. And I'm not saying I'm terrible, but I would never take someone's money and promote myself as one who that's his skill set, you know? Um, I have my limitations and I'm honest about that. And I've had to refer people out. I don't feel bad about it because I want them to get the right care.
Mhm.
And honestly, I've often got good feedback. They're at least grateful that I try to put them in the right direction and refer them to someone who
Yeah.
can be better for them. And so,
Well,
yeah, that's
I still think you're being very humble. Of course, you have your niche clients, but I've seen you in action, Brian, and you're really great with people. And sometimes that comedic, lighthearted, approach is exactly what somebody may need. So I wouldn't knock it.
well, yes. I mean, that's true, but that's the key word is niche. I have my niche uh
Mhm,
crowd like that.
mhm,
Anyone who goes to my website, goes to my Psychology Today profile, they know what they're getting into and they know what
mhm,
what they're consulting on because I make it very
mhm,
transparent.
mhm,
And when it comes to modalities, like I know you mentioned, for example, you mentioned like existential. You mentioned
mhm.
even Adler. I was like, wow, I haven't heard that one in a while. I
Yeah,
actually
that's
one of
right.
the therapists I wrote up that one of the characters I created in my last book is a Adlerian therapist. So
Valerian, I did notice that actually, yes. Mhm,
yeah, he's one of them. But yeah, but that's the thing is you clearly know what your therapeutic identity is. And when I consult
mhm,
with younger clinicians who want to go the private route, that's the first question I asked them. I said, "What is your therapeutic identity?"
mhm,
They really don't know. And I said, "I think you should find that out before you actually try a practice because you need consistency and you need to actually have
mhm,
confidence in your skills. You can't just say, well, I kind of
mhm.
do everything that the agency taught me to do. It's like, then CBT and trauma informed CBT and not much else, right?
Yeah,
And so
right.
that's
Mhm,
and nothing against CBT. I love that CBT too, but it's not my
mhm,
primary, you know? But that's the
right,
thing. People need to find their therapeutic identity, and the faster they
right.
find it and are authentic about it, I think the
Yes,
more comfortable and confident they'll be actually doing therapy.
I agree. Mhm.
Yeah, I remember, I remember you had mentioned Gestalt once when at the
Gestalt,
old agency,
yes.
and I remember that
Mhm.
time I was like, well, first I was thinking, is she just making up words? And that turns out it was a real modality. But
Yeah,
yeah, no,
I use empty chair all the
sure.
time, staying in the here and now, especially when I do something called the trauma egg, and it's, what I'm known for. I kind of picked it up along the way, in various agencies with interventionists, and then I got trained by a good friend of mine, Lorraine Fogarty. I'm gonna give her a little shout out at Serenity Wellness. Whoop, whoop. She did a good training on that over at the last treatment center I was at northbound, and I'm really happy that I had that have that underneath my belt because it's done wonders in working in, and it's very cathartic, but I add a bit of like psychodrama and gestalt to it. I add schema work into it, and it ends up being like a full-on 3-hour workshop, so it's pretty cool.
Nice. Well,
Mhm.
and I'm sure you're gonna evolve that even further in your new practice and everything. And
Thank
I
you.
definitely look forward to, getting updates from that as you go and having you back on in the future.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate you for having
Appreciate you
me,
coming on.
and thank you for being a great host.
And just for the people listening, all of the links for Andrea's programs and things will be in the description. So please give her a visit, follow her on her social media as well. She's very active on it. So, all right. Thank you again.
Thank you.